Hi everyone, I'm Yash Singhal, the co-founder of K-Stalker. I help legal teams turn complexity into clarity using AI systems and automations. Legal Talks with Yash is where we bring the smartest legal minds together to decode the future of law and how things actually get built, not in theory, but in the trenches of real operators. Today we have with us Mrs. Mary Albertson. She's the director of the Office of Technology Licensing at Georgia Tech and an internationally recognized technology transfer leader. She's led commercialization efforts across thousands of inventions, guiding faculty startups, orchestrating complex IP deals. And on this show, she brings hard won lessons on increasing the impact of research through commercialization. So thank you, Mary, for being with us today.
Thank you.
So, Mary, if we dive right into this, right, can you tell us a bit about your career and how you've spent your whole career turning research into real companies and real licenses? And can you also go into how you have actually seen the different patents that people make and when and how things do show up and when they don't?
Okay. Um, I started at Stanford University quite a while ago. I was there for 26 years. I came from a biotechnology company where I was doing business development. So when I first went to Stanford, it was very surprising in the tech transfer business at universities. The breadth of the technology is incredibly broad as opposed to in a company. So I spent my time there managing different cases, a large portfolio, probably
Mhm.
400 cases, trying to determine which technologies would make the greatest impact. So they not only needed to have commercial potential, but we needed them to be positive. There were all kinds of inventions that I managed. I had ones where they were for detecting epileptic seizures, ones for page rank algorithms, ones on the physical science side for different kinds of semiconductor chip technologies. And in each case, you had to go from just a basic scientific idea that had had some reduction to
Mhm.
practice and try and picture how does that fit in a company and what is the path to becoming a product.
Really interesting. And it's very interesting to know more about your work at Stanford. So when you mentioned the PageRank algorithm, and again, I think this is a bit of the thing. So is this the same one that is used at Google today?
That's not the one that I managed, but yes, our office did license the Google technology, the PageRank algorithm.
Really interesting, really interesting. So when people see patents, you see these transitional risk, culture, and timing, right? So for listeners who only know more about filing and negotiating on the contract side of things, what's the most surprising truth that you have heard about commercialization and that you have learned the hard way?
I would say in the very beginning, everything was surprising to me. But
Mhm.
overall, at the 3 different universities I've been at, one thing that surprises me is how dispersed commercialization efforts can be at a
Mhm.
university. And the reason why this is important isn't just for my doing my job and my difficulties. It affects when we go to license something or a company is interacting with the university in a different way through sponsored research or something. It's hard for them to tell all the different people that they have to
Mhm.
get on board. So I think to me that was one of the biggest surprises. And when you say, that you learn the hard way, communication is key. And I would move forward with something, and then you find out another entity should have been included. And I think that is a frustration for licensees and trying to figure out who to speak with.
Really interesting. So when people actually miss out on these licensees who should have been included, right? What do universities actually do? So do you have to go through the whole process again? Is there like a lot more negotiation and stuff involved or something totally different?
We typically are able to fix the situation once
Mhm.
we find out that, another party at the university needed to be consulted. We bring them in. Obviously, as you get more experience with this, you don't make that mistake again. But like at Georgia Tech, one thing they
Mhm.
did about 5 years ago, they formed the Office of Commercialization.
Mhm.
Office of Technology Licensing is one of the offices within commercialization, but there are 5 other offices. So they're trying to bring all the entrepreneurship and commercialization under one umbrella so that
Mhm.
you have this issue of one office doing one thing and not telling another office they're doing something related. So it's a very effective method.
Really interesting, really interesting. So you talk about your experience at Georgia Tech and Stanford, right? And you have been directly responsible for the commercialization efforts across thousands of innovations at these colleges. So what is one pattern that's otherwise brilliant science otherwise that has been repeatedly broken down and has entered into the legal frameworks and the IP frameworks and the end business reality at the places you've worked at?
I would say again, most of the time we can work something out, but what
Mhm,
happens is you can have something brilliantly scientific that is very difficult to
mhm,
commercialize or maybe impossible to commercialize. So when you go to make to structure a license agreement, for example, it may be very difficult to structure something that actually can accommodate the difficulties with that technology. I mean, you try and do certain milestones that are appropriate. You try and structure the deal so that when the technology is proven out, then the university gets more value. But sometimes it's just impossible to do.
mhm. Really interesting. So in those cases, it must really be that battle between like choosing technology that can be commercialized and choosing technology that probably ends up being another patent or invention for the college. Really interesting.
Very
So,
few of your
mhm,
technologies actually get commercialized, right?
mhm,
We work at a research institution, it's very basic research.
mhm,
So you get a wide range of things that are early stage. But
mhm,
also, I think everyone in the tech transfer business will say, we don't have a crystal ball. So even if we think we have something that has commercial potential, it may not. But worse, there are ones you don't think have commercial potential, but that probably do. So you don't know what you've missed.
just a quick segue I'd like to make there then like have like what are some technologies that maybe our viewers would know about or would be really interesting to talk about where they potentially did not have commercialization potential in the beginning, but when you actually went out and commercialized them, it turned out to be huge successes.
Well, that's kind of tough because there aren't that many huge successes. The big successes at Stanford, I mean, if you look at Google, for
Mhm,
example, an amazing page rank algorithm, but there was no way we could predict that Google would come out of that it would be such a
mhm,
success that everybody in the world, knows what Google is and many, many people use it. We didn't think it wouldn't be a success, but we
mhm,
sure didn't think it would be that kind of success.
mhm. Really interesting, really interesting. So, when we talk about these successes, right, universities often negotiate these extremely complex multi party deals, as you were talking about, where like multiple parties are involved, some often get left out, and then there's like sponsored research and IP and other services, right? So, what are some mental models and some processes that you have set up that actually reduce the complexity from these sequences without actually drowning the third party stakeholders out here?
That's actually a really good question. It's a big challenge, but basically, I try and start by viewing the technology as a central
Hmm.
asset that is in the midst of concentric rings of each type of agreement
Hmm.
or whatever you're trying to get through. So you have one single thread running through everything
Hmm.
and just always keep coming back to the touchstone of what it is you're trying to accomplish, which is get this technology developed.
Hmm.
So try to not get too bogged down in different specifics that don't support the main mission, which is getting the technology developed.
Really interesting, really interesting. And it's actually, I think, about keeping that one main line and that one main mission in mind always when you're developing something to ensure that all the stakeholders are not only on the page, but also like know what's happening, right? And is there any specific framework that you further use there to ensure that the stakeholders better understand IP? Because IP is often a subject that, like, unless you're really in the field, you don't know much about or you don't have much knowledge of in general.
We spend a lot of time as far as the internal stakeholders,
Mhm,
we spend a lot of time educating the faculty and the other inventors on not just what patents are, for example,
mhm.
but what the commercialization process is. because the questions are, what is it? It sounds like a black box, but also why should I do it? As far as, the external stakeholders, the companies know because they're trying to
Mhm.
license it. They understand what IP is, but you have to have a lot of really good communication to
Mhm.
understand what their priority is, so that when they bring up a list of 17 different issues,
Mhm.
you can say, okay, let's focus on two. So that's not exactly explaining to them what IP is, but it's
Mhm.
explaining, commercialization from a university perspective. Let's start with the most important things and get those settled, and then we can work from there.
Really interesting. Because I guess again, it's about putting the words in the stakeholders' perspective and in a language that they better understand that best helps sell these things. Like we've also seen a similar thing in Case Rocker where instead of actually bringing out the technology, we bring out the pain points of the customers that we solve that actually helps not only understand why they want a system or a software, but also how it can benefit them in a day-to-day basis. Because no one wants to know what the latest technology is doing or why they need like a 20-page IP contract, but they want to know that tomorrow, if there's a risk on them, then how would they defend against it?
Exactly.
Definitely. So, Mary, you have overseen over 400 patents in a year, and what do you think was the most unintuitive bottleneck that you learned that actually helped move things along? Because again, like in a big organization, there are things that hold people back. There are things that can actually stop you at various stages. So how do you keep things flowing continuously?
That's actually a really great question and one
Mhm.
we ask every day. So, the one of the biggest challenges with having a large portfolio for anybody in this industry is prioritizing in such a way that you give good service to
Mhm.
all the technologies and all the stakeholders, but you obviously spend more time on the things that are a priority. One of the most unusual things, perspectives, is actually very simple, which is to help manage so many cases is to
Mhm.
make sure you archive cases. Out of 400, they're not all a priority, but being very organized, having a good
Mhm.
system. But the key is communication with the inventors, because if you don't communicate with them, it's going to take you much longer to determine what to do with a case. So
Mhm.
it's a case of, archiving cases, which isn't very interesting, but
Mhm.
important to do. Communicating with the inventors to ensure you understand what they want, but also what makes sense to be done next. And
Mhm.
just the normal things, respond to all emails within 24 hours, things like that. All of that keeps things moving. They don't get
Mhm.
stagnant. They don't sit on your desk or sit on someone else's desk.
Mhm. Really interesting. And if we dive into it a bit deeper, right? Again, the teams that you manage at both Stanford and Georgia Tech must be huge, managing all of this IP across the board, right? So how do you keep those teams always in sync and up to date with like the inventions that are going on and the IP that is being pushed out and the deadlines that you might often have to meet with this information?
Well, luckily, the licensing associates here and at University of Utah and
Mhm.
at Stanford, all incredibly qualified professionals, work fairly autonomously with their own
Mhm.
caseloads. There's nobody who knows all the cases, right? There are too many. So each person manages their set of
Mhm.
300, 400 cases. And we try and set systems up that rely on a database, of course, to help with reminders and timelines and things like that. But it's a continuous communication within the office,
Mhm.
because sometimes things get passed from one person to another. Inventors call and they don't know what's going on. So, how do we make the information flow continuous?
Really interesting. Really interesting. And how does this information transfer process and this knowledge transfer actually happen over time? Because, like, what we have also seen often in teams is that as people enter a team and as people leave and move around, there is often that information that's lost or hidden around that needs to be not only retrieved but also brought forward.
Unfortunately, that is a challenge everywhere I've been. I
Yeah.
mean, the database is where you hope most of the
Mhm.
information resides, not just the dates and the IP information and the
Mhm.
things like that, but ongoing communication and action items.
Mhm.
So it comes back to having good documentation, not only for when somebody leaves and somebody has to take over the case, but for myself, because if I
Mhm.
have 3 or 400 cases, a year from now, I'm not going to remember what I did today, right? So all that information has to be someplace where you can easily retrieve it. It's a challenge.
Mhm. Very interesting. Yeah, because like we have seen something similar working with our clients at Case Rocker, where people often have information across various sources, and it's really important to not only bring that back in one place, but have that all set up so that people who join later or who get access to that information later have one place and one true source of knowledge to look back to.
That's absolutely the key.
Mhm. Really interesting. So, looking forward, right, and given your long career in commercialization and IP, what is one metric that you think universities should track and currently don't track that would help better drive not only future pipeline decisions, but the general IP pipeline?
So one thing that I think is good to track,
Hmm.
some universities actually do, but I don't think it's universal. And the reason why some universities don't track it is a lack of a good system, a good
Hmm.
database, something. But for us, I think that it's really important for us to start doing a better job tracking relationships
Hmm.
with industry,
Hmm.
because we all know our job is to, get the technology out to make an impact.
Hmm.
Well, along the way, before you even get to royalties or products, you have to form a relationship with the company so you understand what they want, so then you can show them what you want. It sounds real basic, but it's like in sales,
Hmm.
tracking when you contact someone, but you got to keep contacting them, keep talking to them. So out of that will come licenses, etc. But
Hmm.
even just having the conversation with the company, you're amplifying the impact of the research by
Partnerships.
letting the world know, the fantastic work that's going on here at Georgia Tech,
Hmm.
and it could spawn sponsored research, a consulting agreement with the faculty member. There are a number of different ways they could be interacting with the
Hmm.
university. And I think the Tech Transfer Office has the responsibility to broaden their conversation beyond here's a technology. Do you want to license it? It's a much
Hmm.
bigger conversation.
Definitely. Definitely, really true. So, when you are talking about not only talking with those external stakeholders, but the companies, right? So, what is one good way that you've seen those relationships are built at the college right now and at the university level right now that help not only force those relationships over a long time, but also create useful IP for universities and for companies?
So, if I understand your question, it's
Hmm.
about developing and maintaining the relationship with the
Yes.
companies. It's the communication. It all sounds
Hmm.
simple, just like with the faculty. You need to talk to them, not just when you want something. Talk to them, understand what it is they're doing and what they need. And I mean, well beyond what's on the web page,
Hmm.
and give them information other than just technologies. Oh, so you're interested in that area. We have some faculty working
Uh-huh.
in this area. Would you like to meet and talk to them? So all
Hmm.
of that brings the various stakeholders, including the inventors, into one conversation ongoing.
Hmm.
So eventually what will happen is something will come out of that relationship, hopefully, that will then be commercialized, brought to market, and be used by people out there who need it.
Makes sense. Makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. So, a tangent off of this, right? When the industry currently often underestimates how political and cultural commercialization can get, right? Inside the teams, inside the universities, and outside too. So, what is one leadership habit that you have personally seen that you use to influence your team to not slow down the momentum across these IP and commercialization deals?
It sounds very simple, probably, but my mantra with my team is just get the deal done. So, outside of things like, indemnification, negation of
Mhm.
warranties, things like that, things that legally we can't change on. On other things, sometimes the team will come back and they're really struggling because there are certain terms they don't want to give in on. And I'm like, let's just get the deal done. We still want to get value for it and things like that, but there's a whole host of things we don't have
Mhm.
to prevail on. So for me, I try and shield the company from all the politics and people saying you should do this, you should do that, I just take it upon my shoulders and then don't pass that on to my team. Just tell the team, just do the deal. I'll deal with it. So the best thing to do is not let them let the licensee see that there are all these political considerations.
Definitely really true. And then honestly, I think that's a great leadership principle because when a leader instills that confidence in their team that they are not only free to do things that they're good at while you as a leader are taking care of the politics and all of those cross communications, not only do they get confidence in you, but they also get confidence in their work and they can actually focus on things that matter the most to them and can create the best output from their end. Really
Yes, I
interesting.
agree.
So going off that, right? What has been a scenario where you've seen this shielding kind of go wrong or not work out the best for the team at that time?
That's interesting. Well, it wasn't really political, but we had a situation where a particular policy wasn't followed exactly correctly, and it came back. There was an issue, and it involved an investigation and all kinds of things. But in the end, it was okay
Mhm.
because it wasn't malicious intent and things like that. But I would say I'm lucky. There hasn't been anything that's been horrible. I'm lucky because at Georgia Tech, very, very supportive upper
Mhm.
admin, and they let us work very autonomously. And the same situation was true at Stanford and University of Utah. So I've been lucky.
No, no, it's great to have that like supportive team and supportive management that really helps push things forward. So moving on, right? In your view, what is the number one thing that industry currently constantly misreads about university IP maturity and commercial readiness, and how ready the actual IP is to enter into the markets that it is going into and in the companies that it's going into?
That's an interesting question
Mhm.
because I think they don't actually misread the readiness of the
Mhm.
technology because they always say, "Oh, that's so early stage," but I think they don't calibrate their expectation
Mhm.
properly. We're a basic research institute. You know, that's what we do, basic research. So very few things that come out of the university are going to be TRL 6 or something like that. So they come to us and then they say, "Well, this is too early." And I'm like, "Well, yeah, your assessment is correct. You haven't missed that. You haven't misread it." But that's kind of what the expectation needs to be, that it's early
Mhm.
stage and in many cases hasn't been scaled up. Um, so that's a risk. It hasn't been de-risked.
Mm. Really interesting. And like, I know that Georgia Tech has been working to increase their commercialization potential and the actual commercialization of the IP that's created, right? So, how is the team in commercialization, your team in IP, better creating that framework for people to not only push commercialization forward, but also make the research and make the teams ready for the actual commercial potential of their technology?
Well, we're doing a couple different things. One, internally, a lot of education of the faculty about what the process is, what their involvement would be,
Mhm.
continuous communication during the process, which wasn't always the case. The reason why that's important is not only to keep the inventor happy, but it's so that we can learn more all along the
Mhm.
way. If we're talking about what's happening, they can give us input. Um, so I think that that's something that's important. Now I forgot what your question was.
No, I was just asking, so like in addition to making the commercialization like IP possible, right? How are you further pushing the team so that the actual research and the actual IP that they're creating is useful to the industry?
Got it. Thank you. So my internal teams, the licensing associates,
Mhm.
are we're trying to put more focus on spending time building those relationships
Mhm.
I was talking about with the companies.
Mhm.
And as you know, licenses are a lagging indicator.
Mhm.
So we've got more disclosures. That was one of our missions. Now we need to get more licenses. Well, in order to do that, there may be one or two that we get right away, but we
Mhm.
need to start cultivating those relationships so that next year or the year after, when we have the right technology or the
Mhm.
company is ready for the technology, We also, this year, I hired someone to specifically work on different verticals and what technologies do we have, which sounds
Mhm.
very simple, but you can't just use keywords. What do we have, and how does that match what industry is looking for so that we can get a conversation going? So we're using alumni and people like that to help us assess the technology and figure out where it fits.
Really interesting, like making use of that network and that series of experts that you have to actually
Yep.
find out the risk there. Really interesting. So, talking about this risk and this IP potential itself, right? People are used to knowing about the entrepreneurial risk and the industrial risk and how companies operate with risk, right? But there is often a structural difference between that and the university risk that's often there, right? So, what's often a blind spot that enterprise GCs still have? And again, because enterprises usually do not operate in the public eye, right? So, what is
Correct.
something that is a blind spot for them that you have to take care of working in the IP and licensing in a college that is much more public facing versus an enterprise?
Right. That's a really good question. And I think most of the companies that we deal with who come to take licenses, whether it was at Stanford, Utah, or here, sometimes miscalculate
Mhm,
the value of doing a license to the university.
mhm,
And what I mean is there are many things that are more important to the university than doing a license.
mhm,
So the reputation is the most important thing. And then the legalities. So things like negation of warranties, insurance, things that I had mentioned before,
mhm,
we can't change a lot of those because of state law, because of policy, because of university practice.
mhm,
And so I think what I found in my negotiations is that a lot of times the company gets very agitated that we won't change certain things. And my view is trying to explain to them why this is
mhm,
not negotiable so that we can move on to the important things, which is, the financial terms, the milestones, things like that. It really is a problem. I mean, we have both at Stanford, Utah, and here, I put clauses in blue that we can't negotiate, and
mhm.
they still negotiate them. So I'm not sure what else what else to do.
No, and that can often be a problem where like you have certain clauses that are again non-negotiable, maybe because of the company's policy, because of the university's policy, or maybe because of a government-wide policy. And
Exactly. Exactly. So I think that's the blind spot of some general counsel when they get involved in negotiating it, is that I'm not taking a negotiating stance. This is, I have no room here. And there are lots of places I do. It's give and take, it's a negotiation. But I think that is a bit of a blind spot. I occasionally, in a casual conversation, not negotiation, I will just explain to them the university isn't going to risk its reputation or its finances for, a $50,000 deal.
definitely, definitely makes sense. And that is something that people often don't understand outside the university. So thanks again, Mary, for that. And before we close this conversation, right, one final question that I had for you is that from an IP perspective, right, how do you see the technology changing in the next 5 years or the next 10 years? And how do you see processes changing within organizations that will not only change the workflows that your team work with, but the actual output of the IP and of the licensing agreements that you work with?
Well, I hate to say it, but on the tip of everybody's tongue is AI. That's going to change the inventions that we deal with.
Mm,
It's going to change the way we approach patent protection, right? I mean, some of that is it's fluid, it's being worked out, and it will definitely affect processes.
mhm,
It already is. There are several universities who have done intensive AI integration, and
mhm,
we are doing the same to make things, it's got to make it more efficient, better quality, and not just do something we don't need. So I think that right now AI is the biggest factor both in our raw material, the inventions, and the assessment of those inventions and the processes we do internally.
Really interesting. And it's like that AI entering into not only the actual technology that's being created, but in the processes that are in there along the way. Really interesting.
Absolutely.
Really interesting. So thanks again, Mary, for being here today. And thanks for giving us the great insights on both IP and licensing, a field that our listeners probably don't often hear about or know about, especially in a university context. So thanks again.
Thank you.
Yeah. And thanks again, listeners, for being here at Legal Talks with Yash.